Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Now I think enough time has elapsed so that there are now sufficient issues to warrant the Andy Vlog Part 2. Or, as Dreddy would like me to call it, the Vlogwork Orange. Not entirely sold on that name, but it is a little more creative than the Andy Vlog, so I'm going to give it some serious consideration at least. As you can see, looking very festive in here. Look at this. It dazzles, it excites. So, there's a variety of topics that I'm going to get into this month. First things first, the Spud in Need appeal. Now, most of you out there should be fully aware of who Spud is. If you're not, then he's the co-host of the Chilling Wargamers, founder of Chilling Wargamers, YouTube legend and all-round nice guy to the people, friend of the people and the community in general. And he went through what can only be described as a difficult year, shall we say. I'm not going to go too much into it, but a group of us decided that we would do something nice for him. It was actually the idea of Mr. Fear GFX, former Chilling Wargamers co-host, to get him something for Christmas as a group. And I thought, you know, every time I see Spud online, his laptop is making an incredible amount of noise in the background, and he's always complaining about how terrible it is, how slow it is. He isn't really able to play any games or anything on it, and he's doing a lot of video editing and talking about how it's going to take 2 days to render a video. So I thought, well, why don't we get him a new laptop? And some people thought, I'm not sure we're going to be able to get enough money for that, but I thought, you know what? Everyone in the community loves Spud, he knows lots of different people, so I'll just go and ask everyone and see who's interested in donating, and if we can get enough, then we'll get him one. So I started individually messaging everyone in the community who knows Spud, who happened to be online at that time. So if there's anyone out there that I didn't contact and you consider yourself one of Spud's friends, don't worry, it just means that I didn't spot you online at that particular time. So I started messaging everybody, and the response was quite overwhelming, the amount of people who wanted to donate, and the amount that they were donating, which was higher, significantly higher than I anticipated. So the amount that we were looking at one point, we thought, you know what, we don't really have to stick to laptops at this point. We don't need to just give him a slight upgrade to what he's already got. We could actually get him a full-on desktop here with this amount that we're raising now. So I asked an expert I know in that kind of field, and he looked into it a little bit and came up with the best option for us. We wanted something mostly pre-built, because we did want it to be a Christmas present, so we didn't want to be giving it him in February when we finally figured out how to put it all together. So it was mostly pre-built with just a couple of extra pieces here and there. So we decided on one, we bought it. Then Mr. Dan the Deathbringer, who lives very close to Spud, took it round to him, and a video was made capturing the whole event, and Spud personally thanked everybody. So I'll put a link to that underneath. Now, this is a good example of how you can perform a Christmas miracle, even if you don't have vast finances. If you're rich, then you can basically do whatever you want. You can just pick certain people and say, okay, I'm going to make your Christmas incredibly good, because you just have that within your power. If you're not wealthy, then you can really just do what I did and just talk to other people who know them. And if it's a popular person, somebody who is liked because they're just a nice guy to everybody, then chances are people are going to jump in on it in the Christmas spirit. The season of goodwill to all men, especially people in need for one reason or another. So it just shows that this community isn't afraid to spread the love when necessary and when nudged in the right direction. Something that I'd love to be able to do it every year, just pick someone who's had a bit of a difficult year and say, hey guys, give me some money and then we'll buy something for this person, and surprise them, give them a really good year. But really, who am I to decide which one person each year warrants that kind of treatment? It's not really my place to be the voice of the entire community for that. So what would be slightly more realistic could be maybe a Wargaming Secret Santa kind of thing, with slightly less valuable presents obviously, but it would be a way to get everyone involved and keep it fair. so it didn't just look like I was just hand-picking people and saying, okay, here's who's going to get a really nice present this year, because that's not really the point at all. Also, one thing, it was very difficult to keep this whole thing under wraps, as you can imagine. He was getting a little bit suspicious towards the end, because several of us were all asking if he was going to be in on the night that the present was supposed to be delivered, and he thought, that's a bit strange, people don't usually ask if I'm going out on a random Saturday night. And about 5 people all asked him at once, which, it didn't tip him off that anything of this magnitude was going to happen, but he started to sense something was afoot. But he had no idea really that it was going to be something like this, so he was very emotional, so I would implore everyone to go and watch the video. And it should rekindle your love for humanity and for community spirit, if nothing else. So, next topic. As some of you may have seen, with the Ringo's Advent Challenge videos, the Christmas song that I used at the beginning of those videos was actually the old Wargaming Chums theme music. If you don't know what the Wargaming Chums was, it was really the response of several of us in the community who were kind of on the outskirts. Our response to the more established groups like the Wargames Consortium and all those things, you know, where people kind of band together for the common good, if you will, that they help each other get exposure, all that kind of business. And because we weren't really part of any of those groups, we just formed our own little, kind of a parody group, and called it the Wargaming Chums, had pictures of old ladies hugging on it and that kind of thing, and it had a funny little theme song. And it got me to thinking about all the various groups of people that I've affiliated with over the years in this community, over the last couple of years. And the first people that I really started chatting to were the people that became the Wargaming Chums, that era. So there was guys like the old Git, now known as Styrene Phoenix, there was Farron Adams, there was Dread Lunn, there was a few other people. And really, it was a good gateway into interacting with the community in general, because we weren't really embraced by the masses, if you will. We didn't really have huge subscriber bases, so we could just chat of an evening. And it was through them that got me more confident interacting with everyone in the community, which then led to me attending the Grumpy Old Wargamers convention, which is where I basically met some people who were very influential in my progression into the community, the people like Spud and Joey, the Beasts of War people. And I'd lost touch a little bit with some of the original Wargaming Chums people. I still talk to some of them on Google Plus and Facebook a little bit. But what tends to happen in this community, I've found, is that you'll not necessarily outgrow a group of people, but you'll almost grow apart a little bit, because you're drawn together by whatever you've got in common, which is wargaming. You'll talk about that, and you'll reach a point as each of you start to develop different interests within the hobby, that you'll kind of branch out. So the community that you're in, the sub-community, will grow as more people come in, and then it'll split, like a cell, when it breaks off into two. That's how I look at it. And you'll have people that have one particular interest go in that direction, other people in that direction, and then wherever you're going, whatever it is that you're interested in, you'll start to bring in more people into that group, and then that'll expand and expand again, and then you'll split down the middle and go off into an even more of a niche area, until you end up with basically doing the same thing over and over again. That's kind of what happened. That happened with the Wargaming Chums. It expanded a bit, and then started talking more exclusively to certain groups of people because they were interested in the same kind of things I am. And then I started going in hangouts with quite a few American people, because I started becoming friends with Spud, and he talked to a lot of the American people in the community, so I started going in those hangouts quite a bit. Don't so much now. It depends on my sleep pattern though, because generally their hangouts happen for us about 4 o'clock in the morning, something obscene like that, so it's not that common that I'm awake at that point. Even though some people will have you believe that I never sleep, and that there's some kind of vampiric blood coursing through my veins, which is plausible, since I do seem to be online a lot. But trust me, I do have to sleep occasionally. So I don't talk to those people quite as much as I would like to. I went into a lot of hangouts with, I'm not even sure if there's a particular term that binds them all together, but most of them are interested in kind of Horus Heresy, Forge World stuff, which is one of the things, especially in GW's range, that doesn't really interest me at all. So obviously hanging out with those guys was fine for a while, because they're just nice guys for the most part, and we would just chat about a variety of issues. But once, it's the same thing that happens over and over again, really. When there's a difference in your core interests, you end up associating yourself more with people who want to talk about the things that you're more interested in, so you kind of split away again. And that's kind of what happened there. So I started communicating more with people in the Warhammer community, the Relics community, the things that were just interesting me the most at that particular time. So yeah, if there's anyone out there watching this who maybe I used to speak to quite a lot and don't so much anymore, it's very unlikely that I dislike you, although it is possible, because I try not to keep any negative feelings within the community. I find that's not generally very productive at all. I try and be very positive in all my interactions with everybody. So it's more likely to be a case of we're not necessarily interested in the same things. Obviously there are some people in the community that I dislike for one reason or another based on my personal experiences with them. I don't tend to judge people based on how they've behaved with others on second-hand reporting. Someone generally has to have done something to me personally for me to have any kind of ill will towards them. And it's very rare that that happens. Generally I only have any dislike for somebody in the community if it's very clear that they're only out for themselves, for instance, if they're not interested in helping anybody. Or if they seem to have an incredibly large ego that can't stand any kind of criticism. I'm not exactly sure where I was going with this whole thing, but I just find it interesting the way that the various sub-communities just expand, and then split, and then expand again, and so on. It's just an interesting dynamic, I think. Well, here's another topic. Since we're in the festive season, I've been thinking about when people ask for miniatures or wargaming related stuff as a Christmas present. For a start, do you even do that? Do you find it embarrassing asking for a box of Space Marines from your parents, for instance? I'm sure some people out there do. And if you did ask for those things, would relatives even buy them for you? Would they think, no, that's just silly, I'll just get him a nice Christmas jumper or a pair of socks instead? So even just whether or not you ask people for them is a big enough question in itself. But before even factoring in things like postage costs, if, for example, when you're ordering something that has to be ordered direct from the manufacturer, for instance, the bolt-action Belgians that I've been getting recently, asking for those for Christmas or birthdays, there's a lot to consider, because I think Warlord only have free postage on orders above, I think it's something like £50, and there's other companies that have an even higher threshold of like £80 or £100 before you get free postage. So if you think, well, if I ask for one cheap-ish item to each of my relatives, they're going to each be paying postage. That's going to be a lot more money spent on me that could have been spent on more models if I just said to everybody, hey, can I just have some money, and then I'll go and place a larger order by myself. I'd be able to get even more value for it. And then you think, well, it's not quite the same getting money as a present, is it? Even though you can get what you want, it doesn't feel like as much thought has gone into it. But then you think, well, has that much thought gone into it really if you're just directly telling them what to buy and then they buy it for you? It's not really a surprise anyway. Or do you just say to them, okay, here's the range of miniatures that I'm interested in at the moment. If you pick something off there for me, that'd be nice. Which is risky, because there's always going to be something in the range that either isn't as powerful in the game, if that's what you're interested in, or just doesn't look quite as good as the rest. So once you start making exceptions and narrowing it down, you might as well really just ask them, can you get me this exact model? And also, if you just give people a set list of various things that they could get, so you're going to feel a little bit surprised, there's a chance that people get the same things for you if you give them all the same list of various different models. So there are various pitfalls when it comes to miniatures as gifts and other wargaming related accessories. And when you're buying them for others as well, you'll want to be sure no one else is getting it for them. You want to make sure they actually need it and want it. It's not a game system they're just thinking of selling their entire army for. But then, if you're going to ask people these things, you have to be a bit tricky about it, because you don't want to tip your hand if it's supposed to be a surprise present. So basically my question to you is, do you ask for miniatures and wargaming hobby supplies for Christmas? And how do you go about it? Do you give them a big list of items? Do you say, this is the exact thing I want, don't get me anything else? Do you give them just the name of a general range or a manufacturer and say, get me something from them? Do you give the list of all the same manufacturer's products to the same people so that they can get the combined postage costs and whatnot? I'd be interested to hear your responses. Well, another topic. Wargaming over Hangouts or on Skype. Now, most of you probably will have noticed that I was doing Warhammer games on Universal Battle, and I've also done Dread Ball games over Hangouts in the past, which is quite easy because it's just a small board. But I've been thinking about doing other games over Hangouts, because the communities for certain games like Relics, for example, are growing, but they're still at a stage where they're small, and there's not necessarily enough players for each person in a particular area. And I felt like I've built up big enough factions now to do a full game just on one table here, have a camera pointing down on it, a couple of people in a hangout telling me where to move the models, they roll the dice. I think it could be good. I used to watch the old bolt action games that Jamie Tranter used to do, those hangout games, and I always thought they were entertaining and fun. I think Relics would be a good game for that, because it's a low model count. You wouldn't have to be zoomed out so far that you can't see anything. The board's not that obscenely huge, and the rules are simple enough so that it's not going to take all day for one game. I think that would be a really good one to do. I would like to do some more Dread Ball, I think, over Hangouts again at some point, because that was fun at the time. It's just difficult to combine the rules together from the kick-off rules and the advanced rules in such a way that you can do it effectively over a Hangout, because obviously you can't use all the cards necessarily, with them being secret. You're not supposed to see what your opponent's cards are, so it's difficult to bring them into play. And obviously the cards are a way of generating coaching dice in Dread Ball, so you kind of have to improvise a little bit if you're going to do it without people being present in the room. But it can be done, as I was going to do when I was going to start that Dread Ball League over Hangouts, but a couple of people dropped out before it started, and then all the other people suddenly declared that they weren't available whenever the games were supposed to be coming up, so that didn't really take off. I think a lot of people signed up without really... They probably had good intentions, thinking that they would figure out the rules and get into it, and then as the date drew closer they thought, you know, I really can't be bothered with this, I've got too much of the stuff going on. And they're probably too polite to just say that. So it kind of dragged on for a little bit before I realised, you know what, this ain't going to happen. I've got quite a lot of video content coming up in the very near future. I've got a couple of Dread Ball match reports recorded with the new Forge Father rules, which I'm going to be editing together very soon. I just put up a 40k battle report of the game I had the other day, so I'm not going to tell you too much about that. I'm also going to be putting something together on what I've done so far on my Kings of War army, the Goblins. So I think I've done some quite interesting creative conversions with them. I'm just looking at them in front of me here, and arranging them on their bases in little interesting diorama type poses. So I think that'll make a fun little series, showing people the possibilities. When you're playing a game that doesn't require each model coming off as individuals when they die, you have a bit of freedom to play around. So I think that's going to be a fun and creative exercise that I don't always get a chance to do, because I'm not normally building these big, diorama bases. Also, I'm going to start chronicling the progress of my dwarf army as I prepare for the tournament at Adepticon, which is going to be my first real Warhammer tournament. I've got a couple of things I want to paint to put into the army. I have got a lot of models already, but some of them are either fairly flimsy metal models that there's no way I'm transporting on a plane, or they're things that just aren't particularly great in the rules, so I have no intention of taking them with me. Because if I'm going to go to a tournament, I might as well take a fairly decent list that actually has a chance of doing alright. Don't just want to get completely annihilated every game. So I'm going to do a bit of painting on that and chronicle my progress and the construction of the list, so I think that'll be quite interesting. Also for Christmas I received it's really a 3D puzzle of the Etihad Stadium, which is Manchester City's football stadium, which I've assembled. It only took a couple of hours. It's over there, looking very pretty at the moment. And the reason I wanted it is because I thought the scale would look good on a drop zone commander table. So I'm going to do a video on that. I recorded myself building the whole thing, so I'm going to speed that up, obviously, so you don't have to sit there for a couple of hours watching me pop bits of card out of other bits of card and then struggling to put them together. But I'll tell you a bit about that, because they do a lot of other similar models, and I think they look really good in Drop Zone Commander. The scale isn't perfect, but if you had a perfect scale sports stadium in a game of Drop Zone Commander, it would fill up the entire table, and that's not really what you want to go for. So I think for the purposes of the game it looks good. It's a bit more abstract. If you think about, if you've played at some real-time strategy games on the PC, if you think about the size of the buildings or the various landmarks in those, they're not perfectly to scale, but they look right, usually, with what's around them. You can tell what it is and it's not ridiculously small, but it's not so big that it dominates the whole area. So I think it achieves that quite well. Another thing that I'm starting to work on is the backstory for the Halfling-themed Warhammer campaign that I'm hoping to do in the new year, when Halfling Pete gets some free time and he's going to come around for some more games as part of a campaign. It's going to feature Halflings, Dwarves and Vampire Counts armies, since those are the two armies I have, and his Halflings. And it's going to be called the Rear End Times, which is going to be a little bit of a side parody to the End Times. Just to lighten the mood a little bit. I think the End Times is all a little bit serious, a lot of characters dying, these huge big things coming in and smiting the gods and all that nonsense. So I think it's going to be a little bit more laid back, a little bit amusing. Hopefully people appreciate that tone. If you watch my channel, you're used to a more laid back, amusing tone anyway, really, aren't you? Apart from these vlogs, which are, of course, deadly serious. Now, as far as wargaming stuff that I've got coming up, well, I told you about that 40k game I just had. I've got a gaming day of some description coming up in Leeds with Spud and Dan and Pezpoo and a few other people. We're going to be playing various games there, probably Drop Zone Commander, Relics, Dreadball, all kinds of different stuff, hopefully. So there should be some video footage from that on somebody's channel. I'm sure there'll be some on mine, but other people's as well. Also, I was talking to some people on the Bolt Action forum, and I found somebody who lives quite close to me who plays. So I'm hoping to get him round sometime for a game and get a taste of the chocolate Belgian madness. I'm just preparing some more bolt action terrain at the moment. I've got an old doormat, which I'm just cutting up into squares to make some of those lovely fields that people love so much. So I'm sure you'll see some kind of footage of all that craziness going on over the next month or two. So that really wraps up everything that I wanted to touch on in this particular vlog. So, I'll see you next time, and if you think a Vlogwork Orange should become the name of this vlog, then let me know. If you've got any other suggestions for names, drop them in the comments, or if you've got any questions, I think I'll start answering those in the next vlog, which might speed up a bit. I might start doing them more regularly if more stuff happens, generally. But like I was saying, I'm going to be chronicling various projects in individual video series. So it may be a once a month thing that an actual vlog comes along. It's just all the things that me just sitting there talking about something isn't necessarily worthy of a video all on its own unless it's multiple topics and it's something that you can just switch on, start doing some painting for 20-25 minutes. Also, I just checked and I discovered that I did actually have some questions on the previous vlog, so I may answer those. I didn't answer all of them directly with text at the time. So here we go. From Gloom Dreddy Gaming, Miss Dreddy of Germany. What was the first miniature you ever bought and why did you buy it? That is a difficult question to answer, because I'm not sure what the first miniature was that I actually bought. I know I received some miniatures previously before I actually paid for any. I think my brother and I purchased some one-off strange miniatures from Games Workshop maybe a wizard, a space marine, just occasional things like that, just randomly. But the first thing I know for a fact, the first thing that I personally bought was probably Epic Titan Legions, the game. I'd had access to quite a few miniatures before that via my cousin for a while. I don't think I'd actually personally paid for any before that game though. So Epic Titan Legions, because I thought it was incredibly cool, the big giant titans and the small little scale of the miniatures. It didn't quite catch on very well with my friends because it was just more difficult to get your head round than the new 40k, which would have been, I don't know which edition it was. It was the one where they had the plastic Space Marines, the plastic Orcs in the pose like that, and the plastic Gretchen, and the card Orc Dreadnought. So that one, and there's some card scenery in it as well. The edition where they had vehicle cards, and you would look down the damage chart and see, well, 6. The vehicle explodes. A large explosion tears through the crew compartment, the vehicle is immobilized, all this kind of stuff. So that should let you know exactly which edition it was. So that took off much more than Epic did in my particular circle, because it was just easier to play. I think in general it was just more child-friendly than Epic was. And I was basically a child, and so were all my friends. So that's probably why that happened that way. I did enjoy painting some of the Epic stuff. That was where I had my first exposure to the Imperial Knights, if you will. And I kind of want to get one of those just because I used to have them in Epic. That's what usually defines whether I like models that come out in 40k now. If it's something I recognise from Epic, or was inspired by something in Epic, then that usually makes me lean towards it. Like the Khorne Lord of Skulls, for instance, I think that's really cool just because it's based on an old Epic model. So, I think I answered all the other questions in the comments section. So what I'll do next time is not answer questions in the comments. I'll respond to people's comments, but if there's a direct question, then I'll save it for the next vlog and then answer it there, most likely. So I expect literally wands of questions to come in for next time, and I'll see you then.